Last Sunday, after worship, after fellowship, after lunch and walking the dog, after doing all of those little things that need done on Sundays that are work, and a nap to make up for the lost hour, Mariah and I sat down on the couch and opened a bottle of wine and watched a 1993 movie starring Kevin Kline and Sigourney Weaver and Frank Langella. We watched Dave. Now, a few of you are too young to remember Dave, and a few of you probably just haven't watched Dave in a while. So to remind you of the plots, Kevin Kline, who I have not seen in anything in a while, plays President Bill Mitchell and temp agency owner, executive, whatever, Dave Kovach, who happens to have a side gig impersonating the president at community events and car dealer openings and that kind of stuff. So one day, while he is not being a very good president or a very good husband, Bill Mitchell suffers a stroke. And his chief of staff and his press secretary decide, rather than revealing this to the world, they will just go get Dave to come in and pretend to be the president while they kind of run stuff. And they convince Dave that this is a good idea because, you know, the people of the world need to know that President Mitchell is still in health and in charge. And all he has to do is just act like the president for a little while until President Mitchell is better. And it's not really work, it's just the ceremonial stuff. They'll take care of the other things. And there is this scene in the movie where Dave is hanging out having a sandwich with the chief of his Secret Service detail, Dwayne, played by Ving Rhames. And Dave asks Dwayne, "Is it true that you guys would take a bullet for the president?" And Dwayne says, "Yes, of course." And Dave is a little incredulous. He's a little like, "Really, you would die to protect the president?" And Dwayne says, "Yes, of course. That is what we do." And Dave looks at Dwayne and says, "I guess that means you would take a bullet for me now." It's a little way of drawing attention to the absurdity of the situation. Here's Dwayne, who has taken an oath to defend the President of the United States, to do anything that is necessary to protect the President of the United States, to take a bullet, if it comes to that, for the President of the United States. And here is someone pretending to be the President of the United States. And in order to keep up the illusion, Dwayne would have to take that bullet. If he doesn't, it all falls apart. The plot continues. Dave, it turns out, is a pretty good president. He's pretending to do things, but after a while he starts doing things. He starts noticing things. He fixes the federal budget, as people do. He saves homeless shelters, as people do. He makes amends with the president's wife, which is a little weird. But generally, he is likable and full of life and a good guy. And near the end of the movie, after the ruse has not been revealed, but the real President Mitchell has died, after the bad guys have been found out, after everything has been neatly resolved and wrapped up, and the vice president, who is a good public servant, becomes the president, Dave is about to walk off into the sunset. And he talks to Dwayne for just a moment, and Dwayne says, "I would have taken a bullet for you." It's no longer a statement about the office. It's no longer a statement about the position. It's no longer a statement about the pretend thing that is happening. It is a statement about the kind of person that Dave is. This ordinary, everyday citizen who somehow rose to the top ranks of the United States government, the kind of leadership he represented. It's a weird movie to bring up in a sermon, but it does bring up a point of why do we follow this Jesus fellow? What is it about him that makes him a good leader? What is it about God that makes God worthy of worship on a Sunday morning when it's rainy and a little cold and there's a blizzard coming? Worship is a weird word. Worship used to be a noun. I mean, it still is kind of. We're here in a worship service, but it used to be a way to refer to a person who was worthy of things, a worthship. You know, how some people might have a kingship or a lordship. You could have a worthship. And people would respond to that. And of course, God had the most worthship. God was the most worthship. So we respond to God. Then it became a verb, the thing you do to a worthship. You worship the one who is worthy. And that worked its way through to having worship services. This thing that we do on Sunday mornings, we worship, we show God God's due. And there are songs, there are so many of them, that are called worship songs that tell God that God is worthy of worship, without ever diving into what worship is, because worship is not just what happens on a Sunday morning. Worship is how we live in the light of God, how we live honoring this God who is worthy. What we do, not just on Sunday mornings, but on Sunday afternoons and Sunday evenings and every other day of the week as well. It is the wholeness of our lives. We live lives of worship, lives of honoring God, because God is worthy of honor. That raises the question of why. Why is God worthy of honor? What makes God worthy of this honor? What makes God a worship who is worth worshiping, who is worth giving our entire lives to? And in our scripture today, we get a picture of that through the metaphor of sheep. In Ezekiel, God is mad at the leaders of Israel, the shepherds of Israel, the political leaders, the religious leaders, the cultural leaders, the social leaders, all of the leaders, all of these people who have not done what needs to be done for the people, for the sheep. They've taken their food, they've taken their wool, they've taken their work, they've taken their labor. They live high on the hog at the expense of the sheep, when they are meant to be feeding the sheep, when they are meant to be caring for the sheep, when they are meant to be providing for the sheep, when they are meant to be serving the sheep. God is looking at the leadership and saying, you are doing this for yourself. And what you are not doing is fixing the budgets or keeping homeless shelters open, or being the kinds of people who the people care for because you have done good things. In our reading from John, we get the opposite picture. Here is Jesus, the good shepherd. And if Jesus is the example of the good shepherd, of the good leader, then all we need to do to know why Jesus is good, why Jesus is worthy, why Christ is worthy, why God is worthy, is to look at what Jesus did. Here is Christ, the God who is love, who laid aside glory to come into the world as one of us, who got into the muck with humanity, who got into the stuff with humanity, who came into the sheepfold with humanity to help humanity, to feed the sheep, to teach and to heal and to offer grace, to love. And even when we saw that, this shepherd who we had not known, this leader who we had not seen, even when we responded by betraying him and arresting him and putting him on a show trial, even when we responded by nailing him to a cross and laying him in a tomb, this leader, this good shepherd, did not abandon us, but got up, said, I'm not done with you yet. I am here to love you because I am love. I'm here to care for you because I am care. I have compassion because I am compassion. I have mercy because I am mercy. A good shepherd is one who loves, one who listens, who has compassion, who is organized, but one who loves. We do not worship God because God is powerful. We do not worship God because God has the ability to create and the ability to destroy. We do not worship God because God holds judgment in their hands. We do not worship God because there is a heaven. We do not worship God because there is a hell. We worship God because God is worthy, and God is worthy because God is love. Let me say it again. God is worthy because God is love. Because God has shown love. Because God will show love. Because God will always show love. Because God comes to us in love. Because God lives in us through love. Because God invites us again and again, even though we refuse, even though we respond with violence, even though we try to twist things, God responds again and again, inviting us into a reign of love. And that is the leader. That is the worship. That is the worthy one who we honor through imitation, by loving others. We are again and again presented with these different models of leadership, these different ideas of what makes a good leader. In the movie Dave, President Bill Mitchell thinks that he is a strong leader because he is powerful, because he is free to do whatever he wants, because no one can stop him. He is the President of the United States, and he can do whatever he wants, and no one will stop him. No one will hold him to account. No one will do anything to him. I wish there was some subtext here. And Dave shows a version of leadership that is about caring for others, about listening to others and paying attention to others, about finding those who are left out and helping them get in. In Scripture, we are presented with different leaders. There are the shepherds who think of themselves as powerful, who think of themselves as able to do whatever they want, who think of themselves as able to take from the sheep whatever they desire, Again, some subtext would be nice. And there is Jesus, who comes in love to care for the sheep, who not only feeds the sheep himself, but asks his disciples to feed the sheep, who is all about caring for the world, loving the world, and asking us to love one another, who is a leader who is accountable. Accountable not only to himself, but to those who he loves. And this is the thing. This is the hit. This is why we are here. Not simply to have an hour on a Sunday morning to be or to pretend to be good people, the kinds of people who go to church, but to follow a leader who loves. To follow a leader who builds love within us. And to step out and lead others to love, through love, for love. That is the work of worship. That is the work of worship. To bring whoever we can find into this world of love, until the whole world is full of love, until even our leaders, political and religious and social and cultural, understand and abide in love, and God's reign of love blossoms all around us.